My name is Tenel Robinson. I'm a first-year strategic communications pre-law major from Richmond, Virginia, and I am here to prosecute Mrs. Hale for the obstruction of justice. Thank you. On March 7th of 2018, a man by the name of John Wright in Dixon County, Virginia, was murdered. He was strangled by rope and pronounced DOA at the scene of the incident. All signs led to the accusations of Minnie Wright violently strangling her husband to death, the same way John Wright had previously done to his wife's pet bird. While the traumatic case is still in the hands of our jury, we are not here to discuss the terms of the prosecution for Minnie Wright. We are here to talk about the obstruction of justice that occurred just 2 days preceding the death of John Wright. In attempts at doing their jobs, Attorney George Henderson and Officer Henry Peters' work was impeded by Martha Hale. So let's place Martha Hale at the scene of the incident. Attorney George Henderson and Officer Peters was accompanied by Martha Hale, Officer Peters' wife, Mrs. Peters, and Lewis Hale, Mrs. Hale's husband. This group ended up together by the request of another female from Officer Peters' wife. She felt uncomfortable being the only female in the group. This inevitably added the husband of Martha Hale, Lewis, to the group. The pod's innocence from this point forward was snatched by the invitation of another female companion. The group, led by the two government-employed officers, had full intentions of visiting the Wrights' home to collect evidence and any other information in the home that could help build a case solving the murder of John. Obstruction of justice by Virginia law is the impeding or intent to prevent an officer of the law from doing his or her job properly. In this case, the job of the officers were to find evidence of who took the life of John Wright. While in attempts at doing so, the defendant, Martha Hale, hid key evidence from the authorities. The spoliation of evidence clearly shows that the officers would not be able to make a proper and fully proved prosecution before the trial concluded. Before the death of John Peters, it was said that he strangled his wife's bird with a rope by neck. These same patterns were found in the death of John Wright, which naturally made those aware of the bird assume that the killer was Minnie, his wife. So, when the men were working to find clues upstairs, Martha stumbled across the bird before the men noticed. The defendant then hid the bird to save her friend Minnie's life. Though what is extremely ironic is that the men jokingly said that the woman would find evidence, never believing that we know that Martha Hale was not fond of the Wrights' marriage, but we also know that Minnie and the defendant are friends, which proves his motive for the obstruction of justice. We know that they are friends because of the established relationship. We also know that Martha Hale was not too fond of the Wrights' marriage. We know that both Martha Hale and Minnie Wright are friends because the story identifies them as equals through describing both of their living conditions in the same negative light. We also know that they were at least close acquaintances in the past because the defendant used to visit Minnie Wright 20 years ago. It is proven to us that the defendant is not fond of the marriage of Minnie and John Wright. We notice this when Martha says, "I ought to go over and see Minnie Foster." With knowing of their marriage, it is hard to call someone by their maiden name. The only time you would do that is if you don't approve of the marriage. Another way that helps prove the motive for the obstruction of justice through Martha not liking the marriage of the Wrights is because she hadn't been to see Minnie in over 20 years, which directly correlates to the year that Miss Foster became Mrs. Wright with the marriage. To attest to the friendship, I will be calling Minnie Wright into questioning at the stand to get a feel for the relationship between Minnie and Martha. I will also be calling Mrs. Peters to the stand for questioning because she is the only eyewitness besides the defendant that was present. I would also like to call to the stand Mr. Lewis Hale to see if his wife told him anything, because throughout the entire story, she was worried that he would slip up and give too much information, and I would like to know the truth. At the end of the day, a man was murdered in cold blood, and it is important that we come to a just conclusion on what exactly happened to the life of this man. The police cannot do their job to solve the case properly when people like Martha Hale spoliate and tamper with evidence. This by law is clear obstruction of justice and calls for the prosecution of Martha Hale. Thank you.